Pregame.com.
I'm Vegas Runner here with Bryan Leonard breaking down Nevada and Oregon. Oregon, a 26.5 point favorite, total 63. Line opened at 22.5. This is a game you like a lot. Tell me who and why.
Yeah, I played Oregon in this one. A couple of reasons why I like it. There's two things I look for in week two. Number one is overreactions by the public. We all know what Oregon did last week, but in reality, it was all turnovers. They had a -3 turnover margin, and it was basically fumbles. And interceptions, there's some reasoning behind that, but with fumbles, it's all 50-50. It's all a luck factor. And with Oregon, you go back last year, they didn't have any -3 or better games all season long. In fact, you go back the last 12 years, they're plus 63 in turnover margin. So this is a team who doesn't turn the ball over, and last week they did. So you know what they're going to be working on this week is turnovers.
Does it scare you that the line just keeps going higher? And you know it's just going to get higher. Once the public starts betting into it, they're going to take the Oregon side, I think, even with what they saw last week. Just because Nevada, we know who they lost. You know, they lost their stud quarterback to the San Francisco 49ers. So, you know, now they have an untested guy. Oregon covered every game at home last year. You know, they were 100% against the spread. This team's always going to get money at home, one of the best home field advantages probably in all of college football. Do you think now at this number it's too high? Still not high enough?
You're looking at key numbers, and 24 is a key number, 27 is a key number. So right now we're still looking at 26
hovering in between, right.
So while I agree with you, I think this is probably going to close 28. Right now I'm giving it out at 26.5, and I gave it out to my clients earlier. So
you're looking to get the best of the number.
Yeah, of course. You're trying to get the best of the number. And really, in this price range, you're always looking for key numbers. Now, obviously, in college football, your key numbers aren't as strong as they are in the NFL because there's more two-point conversions.
Yeah, more volatile.
The guys kicking extra points aren't very good in college football. But it's a situation where I've got an Oregon team who is off of an embarrassing loss. They've got far better talent here. They've got just about everybody coming back offensively. You take a look at they're 7-1 against the spread the last 3 seasons as a favorite of 20 or more. So they're like, you know, if you looked at the Cincinnati Bearcats last week, they played a nobody school and they ran out the score on them.
Right.
Oregon does that type of thing all the time. So this is a situation that they're very used to. You've got them really inspired because they're coming off of that bad loss. They've lost 2 times in a row, first time in this coach's history. So it's a situation where you got an inspired team playing at home. And as you mentioned, you've got the Nevada team who's lost 2 players to the NFL, one to the Seattle practice squad, the other one the starting quarter, or one of the contenders. Who knows? You know, as the season goes on, he may get more snaps than anybody behind center. So you're losing 3,000 passing yards, 3,000 rushing yards off of that team last year.
And they're still going to execute that pistol offense.
They'll still do the pistol offense. That's correct.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. I've always looked at when a team in college, and we've discussed this with RJ in the past on plenty of podcasts, when their season goal is shot, okay, many times they're due for a letdown. For some teams, it may be to be 500. Some teams, it may be to get to a bowl game. Others, it's to win the BCS championship. Oregon, after getting to the championship last year and falling 3 points short, I think they had hopes of returning to the BCS championship this year. Now, obviously, they still have that shot. They can run the table, you know, and we don't know how the rest of the year is going to break down. But with that said, do you think this is one of those letdown situations? Could it be now that they're not going to run the table? They're not undefeated. They went to one of their biggest games, and they didn't lose. They got manhandled on the score. On the final score. Maybe the stats weren't, but I was surprised at how they were able to stuff the run game so easily. You know, Oregon wasn't able to run at all, and we all know how hyped they are offensively. You know, but my concern is now, is that a letdown spot for them?
I don't agree. If it was later on in the season, I hate having a top 25 before the season starts. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. You're basically basing everything on what happened last year, and you know, it's not fair to the teams that are out of the top 25. For Auburn to win the national championship last year was great because they weren't even ranked at the beginning of the year. And to go all the way up to the end and play for the national championship was terrific. But basically, if you're not in the top 10 to start the season, you really don't have a chance. So for them to lose in game one, I don't have a problem with that. If they lose halfway through the season, that's something that's
then they might be heartbreaking and tough to overcome.
I think they dropped down to 13th or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a huge drop for them, but still, a 13th ranked team still has a chance, especially if you play in a major conference like the Pac, whatever number of teams they have this year. But that's the way it works. So, normally I fully agree with your letdown situation and the scenario for that.
But it doesn't fall. This doesn't fall into that category.
I don't think it does because it's the first game of the season. And how many times does a team go undefeated in a season, other than maybe a TCU or a Boise State, because they play in a lesser conference? I mean, how many times does a Pac-10 team go undefeated in the season?
Right.
You're going to lose a game. You're going to lose two or three games sometimes. I mean, there's been times where teams have lost multiple games and won the national championship. So it's not over yet, and especially, I happen to think there's a lot of parity this year. I only think there's one superior team, and that's Alabama. I think Alabama's probably 3 points higher than anybody else in my power ratings. So if Alabama happens to stumble, and they can because they're in the SEC, anything can happen.
Right. I'll be honest with you. When I started looking at this game, I wanted to back the Nevada side because coming into the season, I thought Oregon's going to be extremely inflated this year. They're going to be inflated at home, especially because they went undefeated ATS, and people are willing to lay whatever number. And more importantly, now with that loss last week, 4 of the last 5 losses Oregon has are against teams that had extra time to prepare, not the normal week. Because if you got to face Chip Kelly's spread offense with only 5 days to get ready, you're in trouble unless you're one of the best defensive teams in the country. So when they've had their problems, and each of those losses, ironically, they've been held to, less than 20 points, except for whatever the final score was last week. With that said, Nevada, it's their second year with this defensive coordinator, so I was expecting a little improvement over last year. They gave a lot of points up. So I was looking to try to take Nevada, but the more work I did, the more I started worrying that this just may not be enough points because they're going to run that offense that they run, that run and shoot type. They're not going to be able to kill the clock enough and keep that Oregon offense off the field. And I think that's how you got to beat this team, by not letting that offense get in a rhythm. And I think that's why teams like Ohio State had success in the bowl game. Boise State, that opening season game, that was one of those 4 losses I touched on. LSU last week, one of those 4 losses I touched on. I don't think Nevada has that ability to keep the offense out of rhythm and on the sidelines. So I have to agree with you. As much as I wanted to take the points, I really can't. And to be honest with you, Nevada's they're going to have a tough year. They start 4 games on the road, and they play Texas Tech. They're playing Oregon. They're playing Boise State. That's 3 of their first 4 games. So this team's going to learn a lot in a few weeks, But I think early on I have to agree with you. I would have liked to be able to get a better number than where it's sitting at right now. Fortunately, you did. You know that the key is numbers. I think if bettors wait till Saturday, they're going to take the worst of it. I think we're going to see 28. I think this is the kind of game you got to bet early, like you did, like you urge your clients to do, because the line's going to go up. And up to a certain point, the value's gone.
Yeah, there's a pendulum, and we'll talk about that probably in the NFL segment. But, you take a look at regression to the mean, and I've heard some of your podcasts, some of the things you've done, and you've talked about that. And you take a look at Nevada, they averaged 41 points last year. That's the most they've done since 1996. And you lose their best quarterback in probably the history of the school. You lose the running back. It's gone to the NFL from the practice squad. They only got 5 offensive returning starters. They improved 7.1 points per game defensively last year. That's the best they've done in 20 years. So you're taking career highs offense, defense losing 2 players to the NFL, which doesn't happen a lot for a team from the WAC. So another reason I like it, and I haven't touched on this yet, but it's very important, is this is the first game of the season for Nevada. Every coach I've ever heard always says you may have your biggest improvement between game 1 and game 2. So not only is it the first game for Nevada, but they're going up against one of the fastest teams in college football. So when you're at practice, Nevada's got a lot of speed, but they don't have Oregon
speed, yeah.
So they're practicing against the other people.
And Oregon speed, they just saw LSU speed.
That's right. That's right.
So this is going to be slow motion for them.
That's correct. And they were practicing against these guys, and they go, "Oh, these guys on the team are pretty fast." They go up against this team, and they haven't played another opponent yet. And to come out of the gate and play one of the fastest teams in the country, they're going to be a step behind all day.
I'm sold. I'm glad that I couldn't find reasoning to back Nevada. You made a great case. And looking at this now, I really agree that it's Oregon or leave the game alone. And I suggest if you are going to jump on Oregon, get down as quickly as possible because the line's just going to continue to climb. So I give that a thumbs of approval right there. I agree with you. That's Bryan's pick. I like Oregon as well. We're going to come back with NFL. Both of us, best bets for this weekend is in the NFL.